My name's Tim Kerr. I'm Crop Nutrition Manager at Hutchinson's, and we're here today at the Sutton Bonington site where we've got a nitrogen use efficiency trial ongoing in wheat, and it's in conventional wheat and hybrid wheat. And what we're asking the question is, can hybrid wheat use nitrogen more efficiently, more effectively than conventional wheat? And if so, does that reduce the optimum nitrogen rate for the wheat, or does it increase the economic optimum yield for the wheat? And in order to do that, we're looking at some dose rate work, some application rate work, where we're going from a control of no nitrogen in multiples of 80 kilos up to 320 kilos. And in that rate work, we've also got some work on timing and whether the number of applications has an impact on yield. So we've got everything from 2, 3 and 4 applications of nitrogen to see if there's any influence on yield, on the timing of the nitrogen. So we will get yield work from this trial. It's a replicated plot trial, but we're also looking at some innovative monitoring here. We're doing some tissue testing here today, but we've also got some new soil tests that we're looking at that help to understand more details about the soil in terms of its quality of soil organic matter and its soil texture and structure, something that can give more insight into how to manage the soil effectively. On top of that, we'll also be doing some end tester work, which is the Yara end tester. It's a Bluetooth handheld tester which looks at the chlorophyll in the leaf, and that gives us an idea of whether we've got the nitrogen rate correct at that time. It's primarily used for the final application of nitrogen to monitor and adjust that, but we're also looking at how that might affect yield as well. And finally, what we'll be doing here is taking some of the grain samples from harvest and putting them through the Yen Nutrition project, where they're looking at the nutrients in the grain and benchmarking those to see whether we've got the nutrition right. One of the interesting aspects of that would be the nitrogen sulfur ratio. Behind me you'll see the cooling towers of the local power station, and historically that's been a valuable source of sulfur for agriculture, where deposition has quite often met the demand for the crop. But through the Clean Air Act and through changes in the way that our power is produced, there's been a huge reduction in the amount of sulfur that's been deposited. Therefore, we find that every crop needs some sulfur applying every year in most situations. Now this farm here has tended to rely on what was coming from the power station, so historically they've not used sulfur, and what we've done is identified that was showing low in some of the early tissue tests, so we've treated that with some foliar applied sulfur in order to try and make sure that the nitrogen trial is not affected by the any shortage of sulfur. And then we'll see this through to the grain the grain test, where we'll look at the nitrogen sulfur ratio, which will give us a good reflection of whether we've got enough sulfur on in order to meet the requirement for nitrogen.